Hello, everyone, again. I think if you saw me at the pitch earlier today, this is just an extension of what I mentioned there. And I'll be very happy to get any questions if you might have any. We do have a stand, but it's not branded Sweep. But if you go there and look for Nextshare projects, that's where I am at. So the topic of today is how digitalization is key in reducing your emissions. And to set up a little bit the context, I think we mentioned this before. There are probably four different type of emissions: scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. And one of the key things that we CDP, for example, found was the scope 3 is 11 times your scope 1 and 2 emissions, right? So if you're a supply chain manager, procurement manager, you really need to get up to speed on what a scope 3 emissions is, but also how you're going to tackle that in the future. And on top of that, and we mentioned this before, is you have the scope 3, and out of the scope 3, 80% of that is purchased good, transportation, logistics, really related to your core function. So what we usually see in the market is that there is the possibility to start scanning your supply chain, sorry. But for doing that, definitely you're going to see that probably 20% of your suppliers are emitting 80% of your emissions, and the Pareto rule really applies to this world of carbon as well. But the tricky part is that you have so many suppliers that you're working with, so many different trading partners that you don't know what to do and how to get the data. And you might be wondering, I mentioned this before, but why it's really important to act now? You probably know the regulations that are coming into force. A stakeholder pressure, people leaving companies because they're not sustainable, and that happened probably many different examples. But I think the one really making the tipping point is the regulation. We have the CSR directive coming up. It's covering almost 50,000 companies that need to be reporting on scope 3 emissions. And what this is bringing to the table is that not only you need to start reporting on scope 3 emissions, but the volume of data that you need to start reporting to is higher. And this is going to put environmental data and ESG data at the same level as the financial statements that you probably need to work on. But it's really hard to get everyone on board. I'll say maturity level is so important. When you're talking to suppliers, you probably see that some of the bigger organizations have a level of maturity that you can talk about carbon emissions really easily without any issues. You can understand each other. But for the small and medium-sized companies, it's really hard to get together. And the big question that you need to ask yourself is, you've seen large organizations really making commitments that they're going to reduce the scope 3 emissions by 2050 or 2030, but what's going to happen with the small ones, right? How long is it going to take to them to reach that level? Is it going to be 20, 40, 50 years? So we need to start acting now, and I think here's where technology really is going to be an enabler of what you're doing. But of course, technology comes after. I think, first you need to have a foundation in place, and we at Sweep, we develop, sort of this step-by-step approach, which is a framework that any organization can, implement, and then start thinking of digitalizing the scope 3 emissions data collection. And definitely, what you need to start with is, setting kind of a baseline and prioritizing where your bigger emitters are, and then from there, start working on action, creating action plans, but also starting to collaborate. I think the biggest, I would say, benefit of Sweep is that we help you reset the relationship with your suppliers. I think this is super key, meaning that not only quality, price, and the other regular KPIs that you're following are important, delivery time, of course, but also now you're going to have a truly KPI on carbon emissions that are going to make you take decisions in the right way and with data-driven analysis. What we've seen also is that there is a big challenge, right? Sometimes we see that data collection is difficult. Using Excel files, you're probably trying to make your own systems internally. And I think all of that is really important, because for me, the key message is really, don't wait for the perfect system to start, but start right away to start measuring and understanding your supply chain, right? That's kind of the key thing. But definitely what you need to be more focused on, moving forward, is to have a reliable, automated way to collect data, but also analyze that against your targets, right? Sometimes we talk about having, reduce 20% of our scope 3 emissions by 2030, but there is not real time visibility on that scope 3 emissions, because the reports are always being done in one time opportunity, right? It's a static view that most of the companies they do at the very end, or mid-year on the sustainability reports. And one example of that is we had a call with one of our potential prospects. The scope 3 emissions, they reported augmented 17%, and they didn't know why, right? The only thing that they could do is to report, we increased 17%, and we actually don't know why. They couldn't identify that. So once we run kind of a scenario on the suppliers that they were working with, we identified that they have changed one single supplier that caused the 17% increase in supply chain emissions. So when you do that, in the yearly basis, you're going to lose a lot of time to really, really get the information right and make decisions on that. So what we're trying to do here in SWIP is to really have this all the emissions in one place, automate the data collection, making sure that you collaborate and communicate with suppliers in a way that makes it really realistic and feasible for them also to, jump on this climate journey. And we provide, around that, certain elements that will help you with the supplier engagement. I think, one of the biggest issues as well is engagement. When you talk to suppliers, they're getting too many requests for many different things. But how do you actually work collaboratively with them using technology to make sure that they understand your goals and they're tagging along to reduce your carbon emissions? So we do have, for example, in SWIP, we have the SWIP School. So it's pretty much an e-learning tool that will allow people to train themselves on what carbon emissions are, but also on the use of the tool. And here's a really key important topic, because you not only get trained, but when you sign up with SWIP as a procurement or supply chain organization, and you start asking your suppliers to collect the data, they're going to get their own carbon footprint, right? So this is added value for them too. And you're helping them to comply with this upcoming regulation, the CSR directive, that is going to be effective for them in 2026, 2027, 2028, right? So you're really, really making a win-win situation here, instead of just pushing them to do something because you need to reduce, right? And the last thing that is so important is you're going to climate-proof your decisions. Every time you make a change in a freight or any supplier in the logistics side, you're going to be able to see how much that's going to represent in your carbon footprint. You can run simulations and make sure to understand where the carbon emissions are going to be. And that will allow you the opportunity to say, okay, well, this is not really the best decision, right? And this is what we need to do. And why the digitalization is so important is because you need to do this at scale. You're working with 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 partners, and it's really difficult to get an Excel file and send that to everyone and then do the analysis. We provide that. We provide the estimations, the opportunity to send surveys to collect activity data level to be more granular. But on top of that, also you'll be able to set collaborative targets with them on that curve of carbon emissions and say, okay, here we need to reduce. And on top of that, you have the opportunity to use our scenarios feature. Pretty much you can run scenarios for the different combinations of suppliers that you want to work with, and have that carbon footprint and make decisions based on what's the best option for us. 1 minute, yes. So here's a little bit of a platform. I mentioned this before, but we connect and automate everything on data collection. We provide simulations for getting those suppliers up to speed on what to reduce. We also screen the supply chain with CDP benchmarks. That's kind of one of the key features that we have. And finally, we have this possibility to setting targets and share reduction incentives. So we have a library also in our platform where you can go and work on contribution projects, right? It's not only offsetting, but contributions, and I can send the white paper to everyone here, where you can understand what are the projects that we're working with that you can actually use that for your carbon emissions compensation. One last one, very quickly. We have Swisscom. This is one example of that. Big organization in Switzerland, 4,000 suppliers, 18,000 employees. We work with them. They were working with Excel files. They say, okay, this is unsustainable. We're going to switch to a system that allows us to really get the information from those Excel sheets to something that is more analytical, that provide business intelligence. So they're working with us for a few years now, and they're coordinating their Scope 3 emissions carbon footprint with us, and allowing them to save 1 million tons of CO2 equivalent by working with SWIP. And this is one of our customers, but we try to really make a broad selection of industries where we want to target. We're working now with manufacturing, chemical companies, beauty, and others. So yeah, if any of you are working on those industries or you want to explore opportunities on how to work with SWIP, we'll be happy to talk. Finally, I think the most important is that we are an innovator in the green quadrant of Verdatix. We have everything that is auditable on our ISO 27000 certification. We also have our SOC 2 report, which is really important for large organizations when it comes to security of the data and so on. And we're going to be here to last. We raised 100 million euros recently. We're expanding globally, and we have now 100 people in our team working in London, Paris, Montpellier, the US. Okay. So we have a global footprint. And we're really happy to be here and share the SWIP work with you all. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Carlos. Thank you.